Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Cloud Computing Series, Session 19, Cloud-Based Disaster Recovery. Our guest speaker today is Yogesh Malik, Assistant General Manager, Solution Engineering and Private Cloud Practice, NetMagic Solutions Private Limited. Yogesh is IT Specialist and Technology Evangelist, having more than a decade of experience in IT infrastructure management and pre-sales. A strategic, creative thinker with deep understanding of technology markets, customer experience, future of technology, diverse work environments, and social business intelligence. A computer engineer graduate from YMCA, having multiple technical credentials from EMC, HP, CA, and Oracle. Yogesh believes that future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed yet. He is an evangelist of new technologies, and favorite subjects are technological singularity, nanotechnology, green energy, and Internet of Things, while his deep interest lies in assisting community organizations to effectively manage new technologies and social currency for solving bigger issues. So without further delay, I introduce you all to a guest speaker. Over to you, Yogesh.
Yeah, thanks. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar. I'm sure you'll find it interesting and useful, full of information which you can use in your current work or future work which you wanted to do. So let's get started with the webinar. The title of the webinar is Cloud-Based Disaster Recovery. So as we know that cloud is a kind of a hype word or buzzword which industry has been using, but it is essentially changing entire IT scenario, how IT is delivered, how IT infrastructure is maintained, and how security and data protection and all other ecosystem is governed. So I hope you're able to see my screen.
Yogesh, we are unable to see the screen. We're not able to see your screen.
Confirmation.
No, we are not able to see your screen.
Not. Oh, okay. Now?
Just a second. Okay, we can see your screen now.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the title of the webinar is Cloud-Based Disaster Recovery. Right, so I'll read out agenda for today. I'll start with what is disaster recovery, what's the impact when a disaster happens, and what are the essential major causes of a disaster, and what kind of challenges IT or business team will face when any disaster happens, and how do they mitigate those disasters, and what are the countermeasures they take, and what are the different business drivers, why we need disaster recovery planning, why it is so critical, and what kind of essential critical business functions it can save. So that's how critical is disaster recovery. And then we'll talk about how disaster recovery is done as of today, and we'll talk a little bit about how disaster recovery planning is done by IT teams, be it any function with related to business, critical functions or non-critical functions. And then we'll talk about how cloud enters into this area and changes everything. As you know, the cloud is changing a lot of IT ecosystems, be it how the backups are happening, be it how the delivery models are there, or be it how the support is done on the cloud. So essentially those kind of changes are also impacting how disaster recovery is done today. So then we'll talk about what are the projections in the area of disaster recovery, and what are the current trends and future trends, how it's moving, what's coming out, what's coming in, and what are the expectations from, you would say, the IT managers or a CIO or a CFO with respect to what kind of recovery should be there, and what kind of timeline should be there, and what kind of expenses should be put in, and what are the methods of how expenses should put in, whether they're beyond CAPEX model as a capital or whether they are in the operations model, that's the OPEX. And then we talk about a couple of myths of in-house DR, which industry has seen in last few decades, and those myths are now breaking up with how cloud enters and changes everything. So later then we talk about different DR delivery models. So one is obviously the traditional in-house delivery model, that is physical DR, and then we'll talk about how DR could be achieved over private cloud, public cloud, and a hybrid cloud, which is essentially a combination of public cloud and private cloud as well. I hope my readers, my audience here understand the difference between these clouds, but definitely we'll talk about those as well. And then we'll talk about why disaster recovery on cloud. We have talked about disaster recovery, we have talked about how cloud changes everything, we talked about delivery models. So now we'll talk about why DR on the cloud. So what are the different benefits of the DR on a cloud, and then we'll talk about traditional versus on cloud disaster recovery. And then later, the last part of the agenda would be disaster recovery as a service. So as my audience might be aware of that today, everything can be delivered as a service model. So that's why we have a term like XaaS or EaaS, which stands for everything as a service. So we might have heard of terms like application as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. So this is again disaster recovery as a service. So we'll talk about how disaster recovery can be delivered in as a service model, and what are the typical modules that we can deliver as a service, and what kind of dashboards you get when you deliver disaster recovery as a service, and what kind of automation and what kind of drill managers we can use in as a service model. And then the last one, we will talk about the benefits of DR as a service model. So let's start with what is a disaster recovery. So disaster recovery is an ability of an organization to provide critical information technology and telecommunication capabilities and services once some disaster, incident, or an emergency has happened. So it could be any disaster. It could be local disaster with respect to, could be natural disaster, local, let's say a flood or tsunami. It could be political unrest. It could be riots. It could be anything like that which impacts your IT delivery or telecommunication capabilities. And that's very critical how we work today. We are totally dependent on IT and telecommunications. Any kind of disaster creates a lot of impact. And where does disaster recovery, the term comes up? So it's a business continuity management. So disaster recovery is at IT level, you consider that, and business continuity management as an organization level, that something has happened that is just disrupting your normal work, how you deliver to your customer, your vendors, your staff, and your reputation could be at stake if you don't invest in business continuity management. So essentially, if you look at it, disaster recovery planning is a subset of business continuity planning. So when you talk about business, so it could be your business functions, including your customer, including your employees, including your vendors, including the entire ecosystem, how your business is running. And disaster recovery is a part of that, and it's an IT and telecommunication capability of that service. So that's what we talked about disaster recovery. So now we'll talk about impact of disaster. So you'll be seeing on your screen that that's not million or billion dollars. It's a $69 trillion would be lost per hour. So we are saying per hour if every data center in the world went down at the same time. So this is not a small figure if you look at it. If any of the audience wants to know what is the source of this information or any source of information from my subsequent slides, so do drop in a message at TechGig and I'll be able to reply in a day's time, or maybe I'll sit on the weekend and reply all the comments which I've been receiving with respect to the source of this information. So $69 trillion is definitely not a small amount, and when we talk about loss per hour, not loss per week or per month or per year. So that's a lot of loss. And then if you look at the second snapshot, which you are seeing, 59% of Fortune 500 companies experience a minimum of 1.6 hours downtime per week. So we're talking around 6 hours downtime per month here. So that's again a huge figure, and that could potentially lead to a loss of $46 million labor cost. So that's a per week loss. So that's again, you can see the number of what kind of revenue loss an organization will face if they don't deal with disasters properly. And the third figure which you're seeing is 1 out of 10 companies said that they need greater than 99.999% of availability. And they have already realized that they cannot achieve a zero downtime, which is 100% availability, but definitely the expectation of 5.9% availability is very high, and it will be increasing year by year as the business function becomes more critical for their customers and employees. And on the right hand side, you are seeing that 23% said that any disaster which impact their IT telecommunication would be disastrous to their business. And 87% of businesses indicated that it would be damaging to their business. So that's why you get a feel of how disaster recovery planning and what are the level of impact that could damage your businesses. So we'll talk about two most commonly used acronyms when we talk about disaster impact. So these two acronyms essentially govern what is the impact and what is the recovery methodology you will use. So that will eventually define what solution you will be having for disaster recovery and eventually what kind of commercials you are looking for. So if we talk about recovery point objective, so recovery point objective is essentially measured, you could say, loss of data. So how much loss of data in time you can afford. Let's say you are in a business where you cannot afford a loss of last 30 minutes of data, right? So that means you have to get data online, replicated or synchronized, which should be essentially almost real time, because that's the only way to get as recent data copy as, let's say, 30 minutes or 15 minutes. So that is affordability to lose amount of data in time. So that's essential definition of recovery point objective. And if you're looking at that upper half part of the slide, so you'll be seeing recovery point objective starts before the major incident. So when I say starts before, so I mean you measure it before that. So when the last backup happened, so you need to recover that backup. So you need to find out what's the last backup happened. Let's say in this case you're talking about a major incident happens during this particular day. So you cannot use backup of that particular day because backup is still going to happen or backup is still going on. So you need to go back to the previous backup. So you have already lost 24 hours plus time. So here we are seeing a recovery point objective in time of loss of amount of data. And then we talk about recovery time objective. So this is essentially, you could say, downtime at the time of major incident, so what we call disaster. So you must include what is the time needed after disaster and before, when you need to recover or relaunch any operations which need to be recovered. So you need to combine these two to calculate your strategy, and once you calculated your damage, or what we call a business impact analysis. So once you do business impact analysis, you will get to know how you define recovery point objective, how you define recovery time objective for a particular application or a particular set of data which you want to make disaster proof. And now we're talking about 7 tiers of disaster recovery. So if you look at x-axis, which is horizontally, you'll see less than 5 minutes up to number of days. And if you look at y-axis, which is value and cost to the organization to implement disaster recovery plans. So if you look at tier 7, which is at the top, so you'll be seeing highly automated business-wide solution. So here we're talking about actually replicating or mirroring 2 different data sets probably at 2 different geographical locations. So that in case one site goes down, one data set goes down, one business application goes down, so that should be available at the second location, which could be disaster recovery location, in a near 0 time. So that's at the top of tier 7. But if you look at the value and cost, so that's the maximum. So you need to invest that much into the infrastructure, communication lines, and applications, and respective business functions and their licenses. And then you slowly go down, so it starts decreasing the cost. But if you look at the axis, so you see the recovery time is increasing. So that could be a loss of your business. So that essentially depends on what kind of business you are into and what kind of downtime you can afford and what kind of data loss you cannot afford. So when you combine these 2 factors, the amount of time you can afford to the downtime or the amount of data you can afford to lose. So then you actually figure out which is the best tier for you. So if you look at that bottom tier, which is tier 1, so it's a PTAM plus outside. So this is essentially where you keep your data offsite, and then you take a truck and get those tapes and recover from those. So that's how this term comes up. And if you look at the number of days of recovery time, so then you're talking about you're not even keeping offsite data. So in that case, even if you lose your primary data set, so you won't be able to recover. And if you're talking about tier 7, even if you lose entire business application, entire data centers from which your primary applications are operating, so you will not lose anything, and your application would be up in less than 5 minutes. But definitely you need to look at the cost of it. So that's how the 7 tiers of disaster recovery works. And then what are the causes of disaster? So this slide is very much self-evident if you look at it. So at the top you're seeing a power failure, hardware failure, network failure, and then you're looking at software failure, human error, then you're looking at natural disasters or local geographical disasters, which could be flood, hurricane, fire, winter storm, and then you're also looking at chemical spills, and some of the organizations have never had disaster, so that could be they're already having disaster recovery planning. So looking at a source of this information is Forrester and Disaster Recovery Journal. So if you look at the power failure and hardware failure, essentially the major reason why a disaster happens. And then we are looking at challenges of 4DR. So you must, if you're from IT background or if you're working in the IT sector, and if you're directly working for disaster recovery in a disaster recovery team, so you might be able to relate to this slide very much, that how much budget your CIO or CFO approves for the disaster recovery, and what kind of skills within your IT organization has to take care of a real value addition in disaster recovery planning, or how it is linked to your business continuity plan. And if you're looking at the top reasons or the challenges here for the DR, so we are talking about terms like we have not previously experienced data loss, therefore don't see it as a threat. So essentially, if you haven't had a threat in let's say last year or last couple of years, that doesn't mean that you will never have a disaster. So eventually a disaster will happen, then the IT will have some lessons learned from it, then they'll have to build for the business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan, allocate budget for it, and commit resources and knowledge. So those kind of things happen after the disaster. So these are the challenges which some of the IT organizations are seeing, some are not seeing. And then the last bar which you're seeing is very important, and that I'm sure it's going to grow more. It says we have too much of data to manage. So definitely this was not there as a challenge if you talk about 5 years ago or a decade ago. This has been recently added because the quantity or the volume of data has been increasing tremendously since last couple of years. And most of the data you would say would be social data, could be big data or analytics or all those analytics which a website or customer experience portals are generating, and those are becoming very, very valuable to the businesses to analyze and reduce their delivery time to the end customer. And so with the increase of this data, so you need to have a disaster recovery plan, and the data volume is going at such a level, your disaster recovery plan needs to keep changing in terms of scaling up. So that's why we'll see on coming slides or later part of this webinar how cloud will cater to such challenges and why it makes some of the challenges obsolete, let's say lack of budget. So when you talk about cloud, so you don't need to invest upfront. So that's how we'll see that how cloud is a threat to this challenge, let's say. And lack of IT resources, because you'll be migrating your DR or your DR will be on cloud, so the vendor will take care of managing it, so that's how it will work. So we'll talk about it in the later part when we introduce how cloud changes everything. So here are a few drivers for disaster recovery planning. So number one drivers is regulatory and legislative requirements. So definitely we all understand that if you are into business or let's say you're into business like financial organization, banking, or even healthcare industry, so you need to keep records of your customers or data of your customers for a couple of years, and there has to be a security associated with it, and that's not a normal kind of security. It could be PCI standard, it could be HIPAA compliant. So that's the number one drivers why today's businesses and organizations are getting mandates from local government and the country government that why they should have a disaster recovery planning. Because eventually they're dealing with data which is very valuable, and if that data is lost for even for a couple of hours, so that's a direct business impact, and at some level it even impact your country's economy if your health records goes down and your entire medical system of a country is dependent on one particular system. So that's how regulatory and legislative requirements are getting very important. So you need to look at it, what kind of regulations and legislative your business falls into, and then decide upon what kind of disaster recovery methodology you'll go into. And the second is obviously corporate governance, so that the stakeholders or your corporate leadership knows that what you are doing, what is the business value of data that you are associating with a particular set of data, and whether that is valid, and if that is valid, and if that data gets lost, so how you are mitigating that challenge. So we discussed about protecting stakeholder interests also. Definitely it's your reputation which is on stake if you release an information or it gets leaked out that you lost your customer's data or you lost your any kind of data which your customers don't want you to lose because they trust your organization, right? So, and the number 4 is getting very important. Is there this thing wasn't there for last couple of years, increased reliance on third parties. So as we keep seeing this growth in outsourcing IT or outsourcing manpower or any business function, so you will see more reliance on the third parties. So the moment you rely more on the third parties, so you are saying that you cannot control it directly. So you are not in control of the data which is hosting or the third party. So you need to make sure that either those guys or you have a disaster recovery planning, or you're dealing with multi-party agreement that you'll have one set of data at this particular place and another set of data at that particular place, depending upon what kind of reliance and quality of data availability you want. And definitely we talked about regulatory, so audit requirement is essentially in line with that, because you might have, you might be facing quarterly or annual audits to require to meet some compliance. So that's how these are the drivers which are essentially required you to have a disaster recovery planning in place. And definitely, how do you survive during disaster? So you need to produce an evidence. So essentially, we're talking about definite run books and how you survive during a disaster. What's your mitigation planning? So those kind of documentation will get you the kind of confidence from the stakeholders and internal corporate governance that you are on the right track, even if you lose a small amount of data for a small amount of time, but you are in control, that you have a disaster recovery planning. And then increased threat of cyber attacks. So that's again something we're seeing increasing day by day. If you talk about cyber attacks, so that essentially could be you are a reputed brand and your competition wants to kill your brand. So that could be a cyber attack, or it could be a politically driven attack to a particular site because it has influence over a particular community or a group of people. So that's how it works. So now we're talking about the next slide, which is a disaster recovery objective. So here we're talking about. So if you look at the triangle in the middle, so you'll be seeing we are having 4 words which are coming out of R. So that's a reduce, response, recover, resume, restore, and return. So we're talking about preventive and proactive control measure to safeguard and mitigate. So that's the #1 objective, that how you're dealing with the disaster, how you're proactively managing, and how you're safeguarding yourself and your data, right? And if you look at the right-hand side, you'll see response, recover, and resume. So that's one of the major objectives, which says, how you'll ensure the business continuity, the data continuity of the critical business functions in place, and how you'll respond to them, how you'll recover from the disaster, and how you'll restore and return to the business as usual. So if you look at these 3 R's, which is restore, response, recover, resume, restore, and return. So that's a holistic picture you will get of what are the objectives of disaster recovery. And now we talk about how disaster recovery is done today. So it's very straightforward 3-step process or procedure we call. So replicating application data and application state between 2 data centers. So they could be geographically separated to take care of local disaster. And the second step is, if the primary data center becomes unavailable, then the backup site can take over. So definitely we are all aware of that's how disaster happens. And then they activate a new copy of application using the most recently replicated data. So this essentially can happen from the backup data or the replicated data. So that's how we can talk about how DR is done today. So this we are talking about pre-cloud era or pre-outsourcing or vendor evaluation criteria, right? So then we are talking about 3 steps to DR planning, right? So we talked about objective, we talked about how it is done today, and now we talk about disaster recovery planning. So you need to assess your current risk with respect to business or IT organization, whether you need to mitigate site level disaster or area disaster, or it could be local disaster with respect to that particular data set. And then we'll talk about a recovery requirement. So we have already talked about what is recovery point objective and recovery time objective. So definitely that depends on what kind of business you are and how critical is that data. For certain kind of application, you might say that I might be able to afford 30 minutes of downtime, but for some application you might not be able to afford. Or for some data sets you might be able to say that, okay, I can lose this much of amount of data because I know how to recreate this data over a period of time, and for that period of time I need that particular set of data. So this different kind of recovery requirements will define different kind of RTOs and RTO, and that will eventually lead you to the disaster recovery planning. Right. So then we talk about different disaster recovery options. So we have here offsite, we have a synchronous replication, and we have synchronous replication. So in one of the previous slides of the 70 years of disaster recovery, so you can easily relate that where an offsite backup will fit in and where a synchronous replication backup will fit in. Synchronous will obviously give you a very little RTO in terms of minutes, and an offsite it will give you RTO in terms of hours to days even, depending upon where your offsite is. And then the next key step is you need to audit your disaster recovery or cloud vendor if you choose to outsource. So where are their data centers located? What are their technical specifics, whether they are tier 2, tier 3 or tier 4 data centers, and what are the relationship to the recovery destination. You might be having multiple geographical locations across the globe, and your vendor might be having a location which are, let's say, less than those or more than those. Then how you're dealing with one-to-one relationship with where you restore data, where you store data and how you recover data. And then the last one is managing solution, agility and evolution of your IT and application landscape. So this is a very important point. This will keep you evolving if your let's say vendor is very agile and they keep evolving different set of tools and they keep innovating with different kind of how they deliver disaster recovery, or how they deliver hosting, or how they deliver any application, so that you can match or you can align your IT goals along with their, or you can look at their roadmap and define your IT that, okay, this I can use in next quarter, this facility I can use this tool in the coming quarter, and these kind of things would make my business, my data more secure than it was. So that's we are into the second most important, I would say, phase of this webinar. So here the cloud changes everything. So if you look at the first chart or graph which you're seeing, so that's the conventional disaster recovery trade-off, which I'm retaining on the second graph also. So here what changes in the cloud, right? So if you're looking at the second graph, so you're seeing two arrows which are going diagonally. So the upper one, if you look at it, so you're seeing the recovery time and the cost. So recovery time is increasing and cost is decreasing. So you can very well match, if you want to match the orange color, let's say, and in case of a traditional backup, you are seeing cost is high, and in the case of cloud, the cost is less. And if you're talking about recovery time, so similarly, the recovery time in cloud is less, because if you see the y-axis, so it's the upper part is seconds. So you can recover in seconds, and in case of traditional, you could recover in minutes or days. And the similar, if you're talking about online backup, or pick any circle out of three, so you'll realize here, it's very well depicted here, that if you choose cloud option, so you get a faster recovery and it's cost effective. So this is how industry consultants or research analysts from Gartner and Forrester are talking about that what would be the future of DR on the cloud and why we are going on the cloud. So if you look at the comments which you are saying, disaster recovery as a service is a pretty big game changer that's shaking up the industry, is a paradigm shift offering better recovery objective for the same or less as a traditional and outsourced model. So that's the kind of credentials which are given to DR on a cloud or DR as a service model. And the second comment from Forrester research analyst is also saying that cloud computing and its pay-per-use pricing model allows businesses to pay for a long-term data storage while only paying for servers if they have to need to spin up for the testing or in the event of a disaster. So on the right-hand side, you see a tree-like structure that how a DR can be provided. So it could be hosted, it could be in-house, and it could be cloud, it could be a dedicated. So you are seeing that all the comments are in the favor of DR on the cloud options. And this is how the projections which are saying IT infrastructure on the cloud. So if you look at the 2011 numbers and 2012 numbers, you'll be able to realize that how much of infrastructure will be cloud-based next year. So it's very clear and evident here that as we go along, so we'll see more and more IT infrastructure is going onto the cloud. So the more and more IT infrastructure is going onto the cloud, so you'll see more and more disaster recovery sites or disaster recovery planning or our kind of disaster recovery delivery models will be moving onto the cloud. And definitely we all understand that few years back it was hype, but now it's coming into reality that 50% of the IT infrastructure will be in cloud. So here we're talking about disaster recovery future trend. So I hope this slide is visible. So the current landscape says only 21% of organizations have highly available automated DR system and data replication. So we are not saying that they don't have disaster recovery plan. We are saying they don't have automated DR systems and data replication. And 79% have still the traditional disk backup or another form of technology. So 21% is a very acceptable numbers if you're talking about automation DR technology. And how the future of disaster recovery will be, so it will be essentially a shift from traditional methodology, which is essentially a backup, which is a tape backup, to HA, which is high availability, and automated disaster recovery. So that there will be minimum human intervention and there is no scope of errors that could be introduced when a disaster happens and the recovery needs to be done. So percentage of anticipated deployment of DR technologies 18 months into the future. So you're seeing the trend is improving, so that's a 39%, and you're seeing the trend for tape backup or error-based replication is decreasing. And why you need an automated disaster recovery? Because human errors lead to multiple mistakes during manual recovery, and that is a loss of data and definitely a lot of productivity and labor cost is involved. So that's a direct revenue loss to the businesses. So if you look at the numbers here, so 65% of the companies report that a significant portion of their DR plans rely on manual process. So definitely they need to look out for better options, which could be cloud option, which could fit their business model or their IT organizations in a better way. And 67% again say that the loss in productivity is the most common consequences of data loss. And definitely 42% have experienced at least one instance of data loss in past year. So then we talk about here disaster recovery, what IT wants. So if you look at the top bar, which is better total cost of ownership for outsourcing over in-house. So this trend is shifting, that earlier organizations used to have disaster recovery sites in-house, but that's now they prefer to do it using an outsourcing model for a better TCO. So 56% of the respondents to this particular survey wanted a better TCO for outsourcing model. And definitely second one is definitely a very big win for organizations who wants to look at real-time testing or how the failure happens and what are the steps, where I stand when a disaster is happening and how I'm recovering and how much time more is needed, what is the loss and how I'm going to recover. So that's very much presentable over a web portal so that they get the confidence so that they can communicate back to the business people downstream that, okay, So I'll be up with all applications running in next 15 minutes or 30 minutes because I'm able to see that real time on a dashboard or on a portal. So if you're not talking about as a service model, if you're not talking about cloud delivery model, so this thing is very much difficult to have in a DRaaS scenario where you'll be able to see everything in real time, that what's happening once a disaster is in place. And the number 3 reason what IT wants in DR is help with the transition to service provider. So you might have a huge amount of data, you might have a large number of servers, application server, database servers, but how do you transition your disaster recovery, the data which are meant for that, to a service provider? So that's very important. And the 4th one, which is essentially a fixed contract term, so that's again very important if you're talking about cloud or as a service model, because this is getting easier and very much feasible with these kind of models, but not very much feasible with the traditional model or in-house model. And a mix of traditional and cloud-based disaster recovery. Definitely this is important for the businesses. They want to retain some of the business application to themselves, and some of the business applications which are, let's say, internet facing or which are having definitely workload which can be moved to the cloud. So they would want that kind of business functions to move to cloud. And now we're talking about a disaster recovery in-house model and what are the myths regards to that. So some of my audience here might be able to relate that what kind of discussions they have within organizations, and when they outsource that business function or that IT to outsource, so then they get a different feeling, and because there are multiple factors which were into play, they are not into play now, and there are many new factors which came in and they are breaking their previous mindset. So we're talking about myth like we can deliver a data recovery capability if we keep DR in our data center. So but only a few successful have been happened in a meeting recovery objective during the testing. So that's what it's very critical. So you might have a plan, you might have a proper implementation, but at the time of a disaster, you might not know what to do. You might panic. Your IT doesn't know because they're not keeping run book up to date, and they might have implemented something which has changed the entire application or business functions, how the IT should run, and they have not updated respective documentation, and now you want to run that documentation once you're in a panic mode. So you are actually nowhere, and if you're signed an SLA within an internal IT organization for, let's say, 2 hours of RTO, that means I can afford 2 hours of downtime, you might end up the complete day and you're still recovering, your IT is still recovering some of the data. So that's the myth we are having, that internal IT is able to manage everything, and definitely they lack skills, because disaster recovery is a very skillful job, and there are different things keep evolving, and it's very difficult to keep disaster recovery side in sync with your primary side, because there could be multiple factors in play, there could be multiple changes which has been happening which you are not automatically made aware of. So there is a lack of skills, because your IT team might be involved in 10 other things and not looking at what's happening new in the disaster recovery field. So there are no innovations happening, and your budget for IT is definitely cutting down, and that's also impacting your disaster recovery roadmap. So now we're talking about disaster recovery under our control, so we can do a better job of testing, but this actually becomes very much evident once you make everything in do-it-yourself model. So it might run on a paper, but it might not run when you are into trouble, or when a DR test has to happen or some exercise needs to be run. And definitely there is a lot of resistance, because it takes a lot of time and labor that you are spending in test, and DR drills. So normally IT, you don't get business approval or IT approvals to exercise drill, and you'll be ending up sending reminders to different business functions that you have already scheduled a drill, but you'll not get an approval in that easy way, or you need to really rush to get a sign up from every business line user. So then we're talking about next, these are some facts that a lot of that's a 32% of businesses are still concerned about how their backup and recovery process will fail, and definitely 34% have this feeling that they would suffer substantial downtime. And almost 40, sorry, on the previous slide. So IT operation is still in a silo from other departments, and definitely when people look at that disaster happens, nobody is happy to hear that they'll be spending next couple of hours or next couple of days working on how to recover data rather than doing their average jobs or doing their day-to-day routine jobs. And here we are comparing statistics on how average downtime and reported. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. So average downtime and reported events per year, how it is on cloud and how it is on no cloud model. So if you are seeing the number of hours on downtime, it's 2.1 hour for the cloud, and for the non-cloud, it's you can see 2.5 events per year. So that's a kind of data which we have gathered from this event. So these are the different models which you can use to deliver your disaster recovery. We talk about disaster recovery on physical infrastructure, so which is essentially a traditional model. Then we're talking about disaster recovery in public cloud. Then we're talking about private cloud and hybrid cloud. I hope my audience understand the difference. So public cloud, as we are aware, it's a pay-as-you-go model. It's a multi-tenant model, so you'll get charged or billed based on your usage, and you can, the moment you decide you are not able to use or it's not fulfilling your business function, you can discard it and you don't have to pay. And private cloud is something your vendor will build exclusively for you, so that's essentially a single tenant. And DR on hybrid cloud, essentially a mix of private cloud and public cloud. So here we're talking about disaster recovery on physical infrastructure. So you are seeing that definitely you are completely secured solution because your resources are very much committed, because you have taken everything physical, be it the servers, be it the network layer, be it the telecommunication link. But if you look at the cons, which are the right-hand side, bottom part of the slide, so you have traditional disaster recovery will cost you physical real estate investment. So definitely once you buy a server, you need to put the server, you need to invest in telecommunication link. That's how the replication will happen. That's how users will come to DR site. And definitely there are significant cost associated with how you maintain the DR site. There will be IT people, there will be licenses, there will be applications, there will be various scheduled upgrades. Definitely you have to suffer all those kind of downtime once you bring your primary down as well. And then we're talking about a disaster recovery on public cloud. So definitely you'll see pros here is compared to traditional disaster recovery. You get to enjoy very low cost of building and maintaining disaster recovery setup on a public cloud. So that's essentially the quality of public cloud which you are seeing if you implement disaster recovery on public cloud. And definitely, as my audience is aware, that public cloud options also brings with it scalability. So today you have server configuration of limited CPU, limited cores, so you can upscale it to higher number of cores and higher number of CPU, or you can outscale it. You can get another server of the similar or higher configuration and put it under load balancer or the network layer, and you get battery capacity in minutes or hours, not in weeks. So that's essentially. So So if you take a use case that you added a function, a new business function at the primary site, and if you want to add the same function at the DR site as well. So in case of a traditional physical DR, you'll be doing the same job in weeks. So essentially, you don't have DR for a few weeks. So that's definitely a business impact that's going to hurt your business. In case you implement a business function, it goes down in a week time. But on cloud, you can easily deploy a new business function by having a new layer or new servers get deployed in hours time. Put your application on the top of it and do a DR build with respect to the new business function replication you added, and you are ready to go. And the bonus which you have is if you work in a highly regulated environment, let's say a core banking, then you could face some kind of government or your business business regulations and compliances which you need to take care. So that's again a quality of public cloud which DR on public cloud is inherited. So we're talking about private cloud here. So definitely this approach is a little bit more costly as if you compare it to the public cloud DR, because a lot of components in DR are single tenant. So your vendor or your outsourcing provider will run it for you, put a virtualization layer, and then deploy your VMs and applications on the top of it. And definitely scalability is limited if you talk about the public cloud infrastructure. But there are a lot of pros also that compared to public cloud deployment, you get to enjoy the completely secure DR that comes back with a fully committed computing resources. So essentially, all these parameters depend on the kind of workload you have at every layer. So if I take a use case of 3-tier architecture, so you could move a database or essential core business application layer which expects too much of performance in terms of CPU or disk, that could be moved to private cloud part, and your web layer or your application layer that talks to internet could be moved to a public cloud. So that becomes a hybrid cloud version of DR. And definitely you get a benefit that you get a practically zero latency on hybrid cloud, because these two clouds are very much connected to the local area network as well. And then you get your bandwidth connectivity with almost no recurring cost, and you get best of the both worlds, which is the private cloud part for the compliance purpose and the public cloud for the unlimited scalability. So you can take care of your entire layers if you're talking about 3-tier architecture. So if your database is in private cloud, so definitely your data is secure, and your web application is in public cloud, and you're expecting more traffic, you're expecting some flash loads or some seasonal traffic, you can go ahead and upscale your current VMs on the public cloud, or you can outscale, you can deploy more VMs, get more business functions, add more resources to the web layer, so that your business can deal with incoming traffic or future roadmap for your visitors. So while you are on the cloud, so I've already discussed what are the benefits at every slide. So here you can easily kind of recall all those benefits. So if you talk about technical benefits, so you'll get a fully automated DR management, you'll get a real-time dashboard for RTO, RPO. And if you're looking at business benefits, so you get rapid DR deployment, so you don't have to deploy DR after a few weeks. So it's a kind of hourly or a day job. So that reduces your business risk that a function is available at the primary site. So in the same day or the next day, it could be made available at the DR site as well. And definitely you get a better recovery benefits, like you have a fine granularity over you want to upgrade something or you want to add something, or it also allows you to increase or decrease the resources whenever you want. If you did any changes at the primary site, you can go ahead and do at the disaster recovery site as well. So these are the recovery challenges on the physical world that we have already pitched by telling you the advantages of cloud model. So these are the differences if you want to have a look with respect to how in-house DR is different from the cloud DR. So we have already talked about scalability and agility, that in-house DR you need to buy more servers. That's again a turnaround time of weeks, and your IT staff has to deploy application, and then DR drill has to happen. So that thing gets automated with the cloud DR, and definitely economics you get on cloud. It's not an upfront investment, so you can pay as you go model and based on what you have subscribed. And manageability and support, definitely on the cloud model, your vendor is responsible for managing basic services and maintaining uptime. And definitely there are other services which you can use from your cloud DR vendor that if you need to implement on in-house DR, so you'll be investing a lot of money on hardware and licensing and application, which you can just avoid by understanding the marketplace or the ecosystem of your cloud DR, that whether they offer security services, what kind of security services are there, whether I can subscribe to security services on weekly basis for if I have deployed new code, I want to do a penetration testing or vulnerability assessment, can I get some service, something like that for a week so that I pay in thousands, not in lakhs. So that's definitely a benefit over on the cloud DR. So that's the kind of investment consideration, so which you can easily see that from the data center in-house model, if you go down the CAPEX and OPEX hybrid model, and if you go DR within the cloud, so you get the least amount of expenditure over there. So here you are talking about disaster recovery as a service. So we are talking about disaster recovery on cloud. So in as a service model, as you understand, so it's readily available whenever you want and will be charged or billed on as you go model. So whatever you use, say, be charged for that. So there are three components which are essentially typical module for DR as a service vendor. So there's a recovery monitor, and there's a recovery automation manager, and there's a DR drill manager. So if you go to any traditional approach with respect to DR, so you will not get these kind of modules that how do you recover automatically and how you use a manager to do a DR drill. So if you look at a DR drill manager, here we are talking about switchover, switch belt drill automation. So we'll discuss this in the coming slides. So if you talk about monitors, so how does it get monitored? So if you look at this dashboard, on the first column you are seeing a group of servers or business functions or business applications. Then on the second column you are seeing online RPO. So if you're looking at the first layer, which is green and having a red bar in between, and the red small part at the right hand side. So you'll see that 30 minutes is the targeted RPO, but I can achieve 20 minutes of RPO if I have to run a drill, or if I have to face a disaster now. I'll be able to recover in 20 minutes, not in 30 minutes. So that's something you can readily influence your leadership, that if I get that dashboard, so I make sure that whatever I committed on the SLA of 30 minutes, I'm in control. So I can recover this business function in 20 minutes, so that's good. So I'm not breaching any SLA. So this dashboard will give you high-level view, which are my applications, which are my server, what is the data set that is breaching the SLA. And so if you look at the third one, so that is again breaching the SLA, it's going crossing it. And if you look at the third column here, which is a data log, so that's a real-time visualization of what is the data log between primary and secondary. So if you look at the first layer here, so you are seeing 20 MB, right? And if you're looking at the second function, so it's a 0 MB. So that means the DR site and the primary site is in sync. And in the RTO, that's the next column, you're seeing that 18 steps would be required if I have to, called a DR. So 18 steps will be required to execute, and it will take 4.5 minutes to recover this functions, business function or application. And the next column you're seeing is DR readiness. So it's very much visible that this function, this business function or this application is DR ready and serving from this particular location, that's Mumbai. And it also tells you when was the last deal happened, so that you gain a kind of confidence that I'm secure. So if you're meeting some compliance, so you know that I can show this dashboard, I can fetch reports from this, that okay, I had drill in last 3 months, and this is the report, so that your auditor can see it. So this dashboard gives you a holistic picture that indicates whether you are at DR ready, which function is DR ready, and if it's not DR ready, so what is the amount of data log, and what is the number of minutes in RPO which I'm reaching, so that you can take some measure. Let's say if it's a performance is hitting the RPO, so you increase performance by adding capacity. If bandwidth utilization is hitting the RPO, so increase the bandwidth or reduce your clean or your data sets. So those kind of measures you can take care. And if you don't get this kind of dashboard, so you actually need to wait for a drill, and which is again a very laborious job, or you're waiting for another disaster to tell you what is your actual achievable RPO. So that's we're talking about drill manager. So essentially it eliminates surprises, improves drill success rate, so that there's no laborious job involved. People are really confident and motivated that this is going to happen, and it will tell me what's happening on the ground, not something which is coming out from the run book. And it minimizes the time and resources required to complete it, definitely yes, and build drill automation workflow without the expert. So if you have a number of business functions, which are a number of essentially application services, and then down there you have different web servers, application server, and database server. So you bring this automation workflow from on each server, on each application based on the dependency of application. So you create a workflow that if DR or drill is going to happen, so this should happen on this server, then this should happen on that server. And so you add those up, and it becomes, let's say, 100 steps workflow, and that can be executed using a mouse click. So we're not talking about your IT people or disaster recovery team, people going to the server room and logging into each machine and running some script to shut down some services, and then again checking out what's the next server dependency and logging into that machine and shutting down. And they are spending hours and hours of doing it, and when you recover that, then doing it in a reverse order. So you'll be having a lot of labor, you'll be having a lot of time spent in these jobs, but this drill automation workflow does that for you. And it actually gives you a kind of a very holistic dashboard, how drill is happening, who is the drill in charge, what's the next thing that's going to happen, and which is the business function which is needed to be intimated, that they need to be watched, and how they need to measure each step of the workflow that has been designed. So you no longer have to panic and call people that this is happening. You no longer have to receive multiple calls from your business leaders or IT leaders that I'm not able to see this function or this application, whether we are crossing RTO limits, or why our vendor is not responding, or why internal IT team is not doing anything. So it gives you a single dashboard based on notification, based on the relevant people to the relevant business function. So it will keep intimating, and people can go onto the web portal and check what's happening. So these are the benefits of disaster recovery as a service. So it provides out-of-the-box best practices, definitely, because a lot of research, a lot of innovation, these vendors have developed software and have years of deployments to multiple customers. So they add that adds value. And then the next feature is support major third-party technologies. So tomorrow you might introduce a new technology or new platform which our IT team is not aware of. So you can get benefit if you use DR as a service model, and monitor DR metrics such as RP and RTO, which we have already discussed. And then we're talking about automation of recovery failure. Definitely we have talked about recovery workflow and automation, how it happens. So those workflow will take over all the manual jobs, and your all application recovery become more predictable. And automation of DR drills, definitely DR as a service will provide you DR drills, so you can subscribe to as many as number of drills whenever you want, or if you deploy a new application, you can subscribe to new drill for that particular application, so that you get to use a very less resources and only applicable to your new application code. And multi-tenancy capability, definitely there are a lot of DR services for multiple subscribers using a single window management console. So that's again a lot of benefits provider can pass it to you. And definitely the last benefit is very important, that it provides you a financial flexibility, that whenever you want to use DR for a particular set of applications you can subscribe to, and once you get a budget allocated for not so critical or semi-critical applications or some newly added applications to your business function, so you can subscribe to a more DR function. So as you go model, subscription model will give you business benefits of the cloud or of the as a service model as you go. So that's the end of this webinar. So I'll request, I'll see my chat window to see if I have some questions. So is that all right?
Mr. Malik, I've already assigned some questions in your questions pane.
Let me see. Okay, I can see question. Surprisingly, I'm seeing very small window.
You can undock this window. Just
okay.
Once you undock it, it will pop out of the control panel. You can resize the window and you can view all the questions there.
Okay, let me try.
You have the undock button just next to the close button on the right hand side.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Sure, thanks. Okay, so the first question I have is, how can we ensure security of critical data in DR cloud? So that's definitely a very good question, and that's the most, I would say that's 70% of the time I've been asked this question if I talk about public cloud, if I talk about cloud or DR on a cloud as well. So definitely, if you talk about security, so you need to talk about what is the level of security, and whether you're talking about meeting some compliance, or whether you are hesitating about moving your critical data to the DR cloud side. So if it's about criticality, or if it's about data protection, data security, then you should look at the private cloud version, or you can look at the hybrid cloud version, where you'll be having your data which you want to protect in the private cloud, or in the private cloud part of hybrid cloud. So that's one way of protecting data on the cloud. And if you're talking about external threat, which could be through network, or which could be through cyber attack, or which could be through denial of service, those kind of attacks, then definitely your DR cloud vendor provider should have, everybody who is into this business has a kind of ecosystem which is a marketplace for security and additional, let's say, backup and those kind of utility or tools which any subscriber can subscribe to. So if you have some websites running, or if you have some applications running, so you can definitely subscribe to these services, which could be comprehensive network attack management, which could be how do you mitigate denial of service attack, or it could be your application application stack, let's say how do you vulnerability assessment and what do you do for penetration testing. So definitely these kind of security measures can be taken at the application layer, at the web layer, or at the data layer. But definitely you need to create a checklist and keep thinking what is your the success criteria of meeting this particular part of when you say data security. So if it's application data, or it's a database, or if it's a website. So then you need to take care of how this can be mitigated with the services provided by a particular vendor. And if you're just talking about the data, which could be customer data, which could be employee data, so then definitely I would recommend, and particularly in case you have to follow some compliance or you have to meet some auditory requirements, then you go for a private cloud or hybrid cloud version. So definitely that's a good learning curve and mindset change that you need to bring upfront and talk to your vendor. How do you make my data secure? Definitely there could be multiple options which you are currently not aware of, or there could be better options which your vendor could provide with respect to security that you can even think of in-house, or you'll be paying 10 times the amount of money you wanted to spend on security. So that's the question that I answered for. Just a moment, my screen got locked. Yeah, it's back. Thanks. So the second question I'm taking, the question says how disaster recovery related to SAP HANA. Yeah, definitely. This is a good question, and I'm sure this question wouldn't have existed a few years back. So you need to look at whether you need it as a service model or whether you will be deploying this onto the disaster recovery side. And definitely if you're talking about some reputed vendor which provides SAP HANA onto the cloud as a service model, then definitely you could look at that. So that's how I answer this question. So you need to look at whether you'll be implementing or you'll be outsourcing SAP HANA, and what kind of offerings your vendor has from where you have subscribed to SAP HANA. So I can take this question offline as well. So the next question I'm taking is how is data recovered, data lost during RTO. So this is an interesting question. We need to understand how RTO and RTO is defined. So when you say loss of data, so before RTO comes into picture, you need to take care of RTO. So essentially this question should have been answered by if you have already defined an RPO. So once you say that my RPO is let's say 5 minutes, so that means you are saying I can afford loss of 5 minutes of data. So and your RPO could be 1 hour. So that means I will be able to recover my business functions in 1 hour. So you need to make a correlation between RPO and RTO. Then you need to decide what kind of loss of data I can afford, so that's an RPO well defined, and what kind of downtime I can afford, so that's an RTO I have defined. So by asking questions, let's say the amount of data loss to be recovered during RTO. So that obviously depends on the RTO how you set. So I take next question now, which is what are the differences in cost outlay for DR on private cloud, public cloud, and for hybrid cloud approximate in percentage? Can you provide a ballpark figure? Yes, ballpark figure would be possible only if I have a particular use cases, right? So if you talk about, let's take a use case, this is a very good question. I like such a question to answer, right? So if you're talking about a web application which is mostly running on Apache on a Linux machine, right? So definitely you can go on public cloud, DR on public cloud, and you'll get all the benefits of scalability, all the benefits of pay-as-you-go model, all the benefits so that if you're seeing a flash load that you can get DR ready on public cloud for a couple of hours on every day for a specified period of time, or you could have a DR for your primary applications, which essentially face some kind of seasonal load during the time of, let's say, festival, or during the time of, let's say, some university results where you see more of more of traffic coming in. So that definitely you need to decide from the security point of view. If you needed more security, you needed to follow some compliance or regulation, then we're talking about private cloud here. But yes, ballpark figures I'll not be able to give, or I can give it with respect to a particular use cases. But if you're talking more in terms of web application layer, then definitely a public cloud would be cost effective. And if you're talking about large number of servers, let's say in tens of servers, let's say 40 servers, 70 servers, and those kind of servers, then public cloud over a period of time might be more expensive than private or hybrid cloud. So you need to look at whether you can go for private cloud, and if you want to distribute load between public cloud and private cloud, then you could go for hybrid cloud. And within hybrid cloud, again, the cost will vary if you have more number of servers at the web application layer and less number of servers at the database layer. And definitely, other than these performance expectations out of underlying hardware, it also matters here. So if your expectations from the IOPS from your disk or array system is very high, then definitely you'll go for private cloud. And when you say the private cloud, so definitely from a particular period of time, your cost will go up, especially during the initial period of time, and if you're not talking about a large number of servers. So there are a lot of parameters. Number one, kind of workload. Number two, what is the kind of security you want, and number three, what is the performance expectations out of underlying hardware. So when you worked on these three parameters and you come up with that I can afford a lack of security, but my performance expectation is high, or I need more security, but my number of servers are large. So then obviously you'll go for private cloud or hybrid cloud. So those kind of metrics you need to design against public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. So definitely I like this question, and I would reply if you could just give this question in the chat window on the website, so I'll be able to definitely give you more information and ask you further questions. So I'm taking the next question, which is the last one. What are steps to automate disaster recovery in cloud? Yes, so when we talk about automation, so essentially this is done by a tool or a software which your vendor will be providing. So if you're talking about a tool which is homegrown, so definitely there is a lot of labor, a lot of innovation you need to do. So we are not talking that. So when we're talking about cloud, that means you already outsourced the management or automation or the drill part of the disaster recovery planning. So to give you a picture of how automation disaster recovery is done. So there will be an automation recovery flow manager, and there will be a drill manager. And then there will be specific terms with respect to, specific steps with respect to how you shut down a particular application, and how you bring up that application in the DR side, and how do you shut down a complete application stack and subsequent subsystems which are dependent on the application. So you'll use the tool to create those steps, workflow, you'll validate those workflow, then you'll do a drill, and once you are satisfied that it is successful, then you'll submit that workflow, and then you can test or exercise, do a rehearsal that your DR comes with that automation workflow or not. And definitely you can create multiple workflow if you have multiple applications, and if you want to bring them parallelly or subsequently or one after another, or only critical during disaster. So you can play around with the automation tool. So definitely at the granular level, we are talking about here how the scripts work, how they bring up services, how they shut down services, how they pre-check that some of the things are running, how they pre-check some of the things are not running so that I can take next step. So all these combined ran into a script, using a tool, using that script, so that automation runs on that portal. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thanks. We have taken all the questions, Mr. Malik. Thanks for the insightful presentation. I'm really thankful to the audience as well for their support in making this webinar a success. It was indeed a great session. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgeek.com by tomorrow. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Malik, once again for the wonderful webinar. Have a great day
Thank you
ahead.
all for attending this. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you log in using this link. You can log in the next 4 to 5 minutes. You can have that also log in as well. Okay, see you on the other end. Thanks, Marcel.